On December 28, 1895, a small crowd gathered in the basement of a Paris cafe, paying a single franc to sit in the dark and watch something none of them had ever seen before. Moving images projected onto a screen, showing ordinary workers walking out of a factory. There was no plot, no actors, no story at all. Just people leaving their jobs at the end of the day. And yet, according to legend, when a train appeared on screen barreling toward the camera in another film shown that same night, some audience members reportedly ducked or gasped, startled by an illusion so new that their minds hadn't yet learned to separate the image from reality. This is the story of how cinema was born, and how a simple mechanical trick of light and motion grew into one of the most powerful storytelling forces the world has ever known. This story matters, because film has become one of humanity's most influential art forms, shaping how we understand history, emotion, and even truth itself. But almost nobody remembers that this entire industry, now worth hundreds of billions of dollars, began as a scientific curiosity, a novelty act that many of its own inventors assumed would fade away within a few years, dismissed as a passing fad with no real future. To find where this all truly started, we have to go back further than that Paris basement, into the decades of scientific experimentation that made moving pictures possible in the first place. Throughout the 1870s and 1880s, inventors across multiple countries were racing to solve the same fundamental problem: how to capture a sequence of images and play them back quickly enough to trick the human eye into perceiving continuous motion. One of the earliest and most important breakthroughs came from Eadweard Muybridge, an English photographer working in the United States, who in 1878 set up a row of cameras along a racetrack to settle a debate about whether a galloping horse ever had all four hooves off the ground at once. His resulting photographs, when viewed in rapid sequence, proved that it did, and more importantly, demonstrated that a series of still images could be strung together to recreate the illusion of movement. This discovery inspired inventors around the world to build machines capable of capturing and displaying motion more efficiently. In the United States, Thomas Edison and his employee William Kennedy Laurie Dickson developed the kinetoscope in 1891, a device that allowed a single viewer to peer through a small window and watch a short film loop playing inside a wooden cabinet. The kinetoscope became commercially available in 1894, opening in dedicated kinetoscope parlors in cities like New York, where customers paid to watch brief, simple films of dancers, boxers, or everyday activities. It was an enormous novelty, but it had one major limitation. Only one person could watch at a time, making it a private curiosity rather than a shared public experience. The true turning point that transformed film from a personal novelty into mass entertainment happened in France, through the work of two brothers, Auguste and Louis Lumière, sons of a successful photography business owner in Lyon. The Lumière brothers took inspiration from Edison's kinetoscope, but designed something fundamentally different: a device called the cinematographe, which could both capture film and, crucially, project it onto a screen large enough for an entire audience to watch simultaneously. On March 22, 1895, the Lumières held a private screening of their short film, showing workers leaving their family's factory, but the event, widely regarded as the true birth of commercial cinema, took place later that year. On December 28, 1895, at the Grand Café in Paris, when the brothers charged admission to the general public for the first time in history. That screening included several short films, each lasting less than a minute, showing ordinary scenes of daily life: a baby eating breakfast, a gardener being tricked by a boy stepping on his hose, and workers leaving the Lumière factory. Audiences were captivated, and the Lumière cinematographe quickly began touring cities across Europe, introducing this new medium to astonished crowds who had never seen anything like it. While the Lumière brothers focused on capturing real life, another French filmmaker recognized something even more powerful hiding within this new technology: the ability to create entirely fictional worlds. Georges Méliès, a magician and theater owner in Paris, became fascinated with film after seeing an early Lumière screening, and he began experimenting with techniques that would define narrative filmmaking for generations to come. Méliès discovered, largely by accident, that stopping the camera mid-shot and changing something in the scene before resuming filming created the illusion of objects appearing, disappearing, or transforming instantly, a technique now known as a stop trick. He built on this discovery to create increasingly elaborate fantasy films, and in 1902, he released his most famous work, A Trip to the Moon, a 14-minute film depicting a group of astronomers traveling to the moon in a capsule shot from a giant cannon. The film's iconic image of a spacecraft crashing directly into the eye of the man in the moon became one of the earliest and most enduring images in cinema history, proving conclusively that film could do far more than simply document reality. It could tell imaginative, structured stories. As the new century began, filmmaking rapidly spread across multiple countries, each contributing important innovations. In the United States, Edwin S. Porter directed The Great Train Robbery in 1903, a 12-minute film considered revolutionary for its use of editing techniques, cutting between different locations to advance a single continuous story, a foundational technique still used in filmmaking today. This period also saw the rise of dedicated theaters built specifically for showing films, known as Nickelodeons because of their 5-cent admission price, which began opening across American cities starting around 1905, making cinema accessible to working-class audiences in a way earlier, more expensive entertainment venues never had been. The industry faced significant early challenges, particularly around patents and control. Thomas Edison, having invested heavily in film technology, aggressively pursued legal action against competitors using similar equipment, leading to prolonged patent disputes throughout the early 1900s. In 1908, Edison formed the Motion Picture Patents Company, an attempt to monopolize the industry by controlling who could legally use film equipment and distribute movies. This heavy-handed control frustrated many independent filmmakers, pushing several of them to relocate far away from Edison's East Coast influence. Seeking cheaper land, reliable sunshine for filming, and freedom from legal harassment, many of these filmmakers settled in a quiet farming region in Southern California called Hollywood, and by the early 1910s, this migration had transformed the small community into the emerging center of American film production, a transformation that would eventually make Hollywood synonymous with the entire film industry itself. Film continued evolving rapidly throughout the 1910s, growing longer, more sophisticated, and more emotionally ambitious. Director D.W. Griffith pushed the boundaries of narrative filmmaking with increasingly complex, feature-length productions, developing techniques like the close-up, cross-cutting between parallel storylines, and dramatic lighting to heighten emotional impact. Though his most famous film, The Birth of a Nation in 1915, remains deeply controversial for its blatantly racist content and its glorification of the Ku Klux Klan, it is still studied for the technical innovations it introduced, a complicated legacy that reflects both the artistic progress and the serious moral failures embedded in early cinema's history. The next massive turning point arrived in 1927, when Warner Brothers released The Jazz Singer, the first feature film to include synchronized dialogue, marking the beginning of the era of talkies and effectively ending the silent film era within just a few short years. This transition initially devastated the careers of some silent film stars whose voices didn't match audience expectations, while simultaneously creating opportunities for new performers suited to this dialogue-driven format. Cinema continued advancing throughout the following decades, adding color through processes like Technicolor in the 1930s, expanding into widescreen formats during the 1950s to compete with the growing popularity of television, and eventually embracing computer-generated imagery beginning in the 1990s, forever changing what filmmakers were capable of putting on screen. Today, cinema stands as a massive global industry, generating billions of dollars annually and reaching audiences instantly through streaming platforms that would have seemed like pure science fiction to those early Parisian audiences huddled in a basement cafe. Yet remarkably, many of the foundational techniques developed during those first few decades, editing, close-ups, visual effects, and narrative structure, remain absolutely essential to filmmaking today, proving just how much of the medium's core language was established almost immediately after its invention. That is why this story still matters. Cinema began as a simple scientific curiosity, a novelty most people assumed would fade quickly, yet within just a few decades, it transformed into one of humanity's most powerful tools for storytelling, memory, and shared cultural experience.